Hey folks, thanks for watching my video. Today's patient is a 2011 BMW 328i, also known as my wife's car. A little bit of a humbling experience over the last few weeks and months. The car's been turning over slower. Everybody's assuming that the battery was on its way out. Yesterday, my wife gets in to go shopping. The car doesn't start. So I get the phone call, need a new battery, and I pick one up on the way home, just assuming that's what it was. Swapped the battery out as soon as I got home and got changed, and pushed the button and nothing happens. So the starter is clearly the problem. For those that are not familiar, the starter on this car is buried back here underneath the intake manifold. So today I'm going to go through changing that out for you. First step is to disconnect the negative battery cable. I realize that most maintenance manuals always have that as the first step for any job, including stupid stuff like changing the brake pads. But you actually need to disconnect the battery cable on this because you will be accessing the positive terminal on the starter. So it's pretty simple. Take the cover off. The negative battery cable is right here. You have a 10 millimeter right on the top. Loosen that 10 millimeter. Work the negative cable off. And I always put a rag or some non-conductive barrier in between the cable and the battery so that it cannot find its juice again. Very important so you don't get arcing under the hood when you dig in and do the starter. Now we're going to move to the front. Okay, the first thing we're going to do under the cowling is we're going to remove all of the plastic for the cabin filter, and then all of the other trim up under here. Loosen up the wiring so we can get access to the back of that. These are 8 millimeters. You got 2 here. You got 2 here. And lastly, 2 over here. So this is a good time while you're in here, check your cabin filter. This one is kind of dirty, so I'm going to add that to the list for when I go out and get all the parts. Try to keep all the leaves out of here. All right. Next, we're going to lift these covers. We get a little rubber tab on the back, holding them in. This is your ambient air temperature sensor. You need to disconnect it. From its little house, or just unplug it. twist it about 30 degrees clockwise, and then you can get to the rest of it, and then get the wires out of the way. Set it to the side. Now you have two more screws. You have one on right here and one on the other side. Everything under here is an 8mm. Be real careful with those. If you drop one, you're going to be looking for it for a long time. Now, this plastic. There's another little rubber keeper right here. You want to get your wiring pulled loose. You just go down, forward, snap out, undo these clips, get a little pry tool. Some of these cars have been into a dozen times and everything comes right apart real easy. This is a extremely low mile, it's only got 100,000 miles on it. 2011 that has hardly ever been apart, so it's going to be a little bit more of a challenge than some. Now I'm going to pull this kind of out from under the lip. And we're free. Okay, everything we're doing in this next step is to give us more room here. So, I mean, eventually we're going to move the intake manifold to the side so that we can reach the starter without disconnecting everything else. So the first thing you need to do is remove this snorkel for your breather box. It's 2 Torx screws. I think they're T25. Could be wrong because I can't read the numbers on my Torx anymore. I've worn them off. So you undo those 2 screws. This will go this way and come right out of the airbox. Next step, you want to disconnect your mass airflow sensor wire from the mass airflow sensor at the airbox, and then 2 10mm screws, and this will lift out. And you have a flathead screwdriver holding the flathead screw on the clamp. And release the cable. From the mass airflow sensor, I'm going to use my pick for that because I don't like breaking the plastic. That's one thing about these older cars, you got to be super duper careful with the plastic underneath being brittle. My wife's 911 that she used to have was a 99. It was a fantastic car, except, you know, a $3 coolant elbow made out of plastic that gets dry rotted and snaps can literally cost you thousands of dollars in taking the engine out and moving the, replacing all of the other brittle plastic out of the hood. So with that out of the way, it's freed up a lot more space. And just to show you, here's the Here's the clamp on the mass air, going to the air box from the mass air. And here's your wire for the mass airflow sensor. All right, continuing on our quest to make more space under here, we're gonna remove this cross brace. Some genius decided that they needed to invent a new tool. So technically this is an E14 socket. It's a special socket that some German engineer came up with. There is a bolt under here, or more like a nut, captive nut under there. You just have to loosen it. You don't have to actually remove it. It's right under there. There's one here. Don't fret if you don't have a set of these E-sockets. If you want to go old school, this is a 7/16 standard 12-point wrench. Fits just fine. Needs something a little bit bigger though. It also uses an 11mm. Will also fit on that. But since I have the E-socket and I need a little more torque than I can do with a wrench, I'm going to go ahead and use it. This one's a little bit bigger under there. Again, you don't have to remove this one, just loosen it enough. And this brace will just come right out. The bigger one under there is an E18. So I'm just gonna stick it there for when I need it the next time. Next thing we need to do, let's move our power steering reservoir. 2 10mm nuts. We're gonna set this off to the side. Be careful not to spill it, turn it over. And give yourself as much room there as you can, because again, we're going to be setting that manifold over. I'm actually going to go ahead and take this bracket out to give myself that much more extra room, and I'm going to remove this ducting from the throttle body. Again, all in the interest of just giving myself more space. All right, 10 mil there. every inch counts when you need the clearance to get in here. So it always is it's an effort that's going to pay off. Now I got another flathead on this duct for the throttle body. So as you can see, we're freeing up quite a bit of space here. So when we do loosen the manifold and set it back, you know, we've got as much clearance as possible. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is take off the valve cover. It's a 5mm Allen head. There's 3 of them. Two right here on the front. You got one right here in the back. These should be captive to the valve cover, so once you loosen them, probably not going to come all the way out, and that's okay. Oh, my bad. All right, you have the vacuum line that goes across the top. It's right here. So I want to unclip that, unclip it from your intake. Probably want to go ahead and pull it off of the throttle body. It's got a little rubber extension right there. Just kind of lay it back in the back out of the way. So again, you're giving yourself more space. You don't want to get snagged on a vacuum line and then end up chasing check engine lights for the next 6 months. All right, with those 3 out of the way, you put your valve cover on. Oh, missed a bolt. There's another bolt right back here. Never have too much light. This is one you definitely don't want to drop. Right, now, okay. Now we've exposed the bolts for your intake manifold, which are right here. You have a combination of studs and bolts. The consensus is basically you want to remove these nuts on these studs and then remove the studs themselves to give yourself more room to maneuver around in there. I'm going to go ahead and take this vent line off because I don't want to stress it. Being old plastic and all, probably a good idea to get it into a safer spot like that. Okay, remember guys, our entire goal here, we're wanting to move this, set it back. So take your time and look real closely at anything that might get in your way of doing that. This has got enough slack in it where I think it'll be fine. These are your wires for your oxygen sensors. They need to be unhooked and set aside. You've got a fuel line clamp right here on the back of the intake that needs to be loosened. It's going to need a bigger Torx. So, and then you're going to undo 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 combination of nuts and bolts holding the intake itself to the head. They're all 11 millimeter. The head for the studs is a 4.5 millimeter 6-point socket. So I'll take the nuts off first and then I'll remove the studs. In the meantime, I've got to get that Torx off of the back. Again, you're just making room so you can lay that, move it out of the way, and get to the starter. It's a T25 holding this one on in the back. I have to get a socket. In the T25 socket ratchet, this is a little bit and since it's going into plastic, it's going to be tight all the way down. That bracket out of the way, it'll free up the fuel line so you're not binding on that. Okay, now we're going to get the intake manifold bolts and nuts loose. Again, they're 11 millimeter. Take your time, don't drop stuff. It makes the job that much worse. All right, I need a ratchet for the actual bolts. It's not going to be a little bit tricky because it's and break it loose and then take it loose with my fingers from there. Okay, now what we're going to do is just lift the intake. I'm going to try without removing those studs and see what happens. But just going to rock it a little bit. See if it's broken free, which it's not. There we go. So what we're trying to do is lift it up over the studs, which is causing a little bit more difficulty than it should. So I'm going to go ahead and remove them. Okay, this is a 4.5mm 6-point socket that I'm using. All right, with that out of the way, do another double check. Make sure you don't have any wiring that's going to get bound. It doesn't look like anything's in the way. And now we're literally just going to let this come back. I'm going to unplug your at the oil filter housing. That plug is possibly in the way. Again, could be brittle plastic, you don't want to break anything. So now we're just going to, we have to unhook these O2 sensor wires. Almost missed that. All right, push down on the tab at the back and then wiggle it carefully until it's free. And take it out of its little retainers. Now these two go over that. And manifold should just kind of move right back. Careful with your fuel lines. And now you can see down in here is where our offending starter is. So again, you're not trying to stress anything. Just trying to give yourself enough room to work with. Okay, so you're going to want to unhook that white wire. Very similar connector to your oil pressure, the clip at the oil filter housing. Then you're going to undo the 13 mil holding the positive battery on. There's an 11 mil / 7/16 bolt coming through the back of the transmission housing, which is the hardest part of the job. And then there's another short 11 in the front. Okay, just so everybody knows, the intake is just, cocked out of the way a little bit. This bolt that I'm focusing on here, pretty much in the middle of your screen, that's the long bolt that goes into the back of the starter. You want to take that one out first because it's going to be the most difficult to get to and cause the most headaches. So go ahead and take that out, and then you can get to everything else easier from the front. And this is what it looks like. I've got the 7/16 on there with the angle going towards the front of the engine. It's a 7/16 box end, which goes right over that reverse Torx just fine. So I just wanted to show you where it was before I start pulling on it. All right, if I knew how to pray in German, I would. Here we go. I got a good quarter of a turn on it. So reset the wrench. Do it again. And now it is finger tight. Alright, if you notice, I did put paper towels inside the intake ports on the head. Keep any bugs from flying in or dirt from falling down off of the top of anything. This is one I'm going to be real careful not to drop. That's the hardest part of the job right there. All right, so what I'm going to do now, just trying to zoom in on this because I'm not going to be able to film it. I'm going to get a flathead and pry the clamp, the little clip off on the right hand side of that white wire, pull the white wire forward, unhook it. Then the positive battery cable is 13 mil, just going to undo that. And then there's another 11 mil 7/16 E14 down in the sort of the 5 o'clock position underneath the starter. I'm going to have to get that with a ratchet also. Alright, that's not the sound I wanted. The clip went flying underneath the car somewhere. But the cable's disconnected, so that's a start. If you add enough extensions to it, you can get it back far enough to get some leverage on the battery cable. Once it breaks, it's going to be pretty easy. He says. So, to not compound my situation further, I just got it loose enough to where I can get my fingers in here and save the nut. And then the cable comes off. And this is when you're really happy that you remembered to disconnect the battery. I can see the clip for the white connector. So while I'm doing that, let's get my mechanical fingers out. Or just use the fingers God gave me. Ha! If it was early, if it was later, I'd say now it's time to drink a beer. And now I'm going to fish for the short bolt on the starter. Okay, here's the combination I used. I just used a short and a medium extension with the E14 on it. I got it to break loose, so now the rest of it's just pulling that bolt out, and then the starter will come right with it. Okay, the bolt's loose, but it's still laying in there. But I'm just going to go ahead get the starter out of the way, and then the bolt will just be laying there for me to kit it later. Make sure it's all the way out, which it is. Actually, I got the bolt. Starter is being a little bit difficult. It's been living there for a while, so it's gonna just require a little bit of finesse. There we go. All right, make sure you're not tangled up in any wires, because now would be a really lousy time to break something if you've been this careful to this point. Just gently and carefully work it out. Okay, there it is, folks. So now off to the parts store, get a replacement, and we'll put it back in. All right, so what you can do, I'm hooking this up to my jump box just to test it. You can clamp your positive around this lead, which is coming from your solenoid. So that'll bypass your solenoid if it was bad. And the negative, you just clamp it to the body of the starter. It's hooked to my jump box, so I can just switch the little cable, turn the switch on, and it's not doing anything. So starter is definitely bad, which is great, because I've already replaced a $200 battery in troubleshooting this problem. All right, brand new starter, AutoZone. It's a Duralast Premium. It is actually a new, not a reman. It was about 169 bucks, which is actually the same price as a reman. So, duh, we're gonna go with new. I'm gonna go ahead and put it back in where the old one came out. I'm gonna finger tight both bolts just to make sure they both get started. And then I'm gonna start reconnecting things. Be very careful to route around all the plastic wires and the connections so you don't break anything. Be ashamed to get this far and mess something up. The positive battery cable is hanging on the lip there, so that's what I'm having to just kind of wrestle it around. there's something else in the way. Cleared that hurdle. It's impossible to show you from this angle, but you can look down in between the intake runners and see what you're doing up against the block if you have enough light. So the starter is pretty much in place now. It's flush up against the block. So I'm going to thread the long bolt in from behind first and kind of get that moving. All right, everything's in place, but I'm going to now thread the bolt in from the back without dropping it, hopefully. Okay, I'm not feeling the threads biting any, so I'm going to just slightly rotate the starter. Trial and error until I actually get the threads started. Get that feeling of satisfaction when the bolt starts going in. All right, it started pretty well. I've got it about halfway down the thread. So what I'm gonna do is just finger tight it up against the bell housing or the block or transmission. And then I'm going to start the short one from the front. And once I've got them both threaded, then I'll snug them both up. BMW recommends you use new bolts on these. Several of the other YouTube guys that have done these in the past have said it's fine to do without. There's not a whole ton of torque on them because you can tighten them with a short wrench. Once it's in place, it's really not going to go anywhere. So I feel pretty good about reusing these bolts, but you know, the manufacturer recommends new bolts. All right, the bolt is tight, finger tight, so now I'm going to do the front. what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna use a piece of painter's tape just on the lip of this bolt like this, just so I don't have to keep fishing the bolt out. And I'm just gonna hand tight it using the extensions. Again, I can see the hole here, which there's really no way to show you on camera, but looking down in between these two back ports on this intake, you can see what you got to do. And it's starting to thread, so that's good. It's hot. Tape's nice because it's not sticky enough to stay in there, but now it's threaded down tight, so I'm going to go ahead and torque it with the ratchet. Bottom one's tight. Now I get my 7/16 wrench and tighten one on the back. It's snug. We got a couple more turns I can do with my fingers just to save the back and forth with a wrench. Okay, now I'm going to reconnect the positive battery cable. Do everything by hand first. Make sure you don't drop the lock washer. Get it nice and snug. Remember, tight is tight, too tight is broken. You don't have a whole lot of room to work with that intake there, but it's fine. All right, I'm gonna get a longer 13 because I think I ran out of socket. Okay, just use a longer 13 mil socket to make sure I've got this nut reasonably tight, which it is. Now I put the little wire clip back on the connection for the solenoid. And it'll only go on one way. The clip goes to the right. That satisfying click when I put it back in there. Here's the starter, the new starter in place and connected. Okay, starter is connected, everything's back in place. BMW recommends that you put new intake manifold gaskets on here when you replace, whenever you have the intake off, they want you to put new gaskets. I've checked these. These are pretty high quality rubber / silicone. They're in good shape. There's no tears. I'm going to reuse them, but again, the manufacturer recommends. So what I'm doing is getting my paper towels out of the intake ports on the head, because I actually want it to start when I turn it on. And again, being extremely gentle, I'm going to just persuade this intake back into place. Make sure that I don't have any cables pinched, like this one was trying to be. Basically, you know, you're setting it back in its spot that it came from. And I'm going to put the bolts on each end, and then I'm going to put the studs back in. Remember, you had 4 bolts total, and then you had 3 studs and a washer on each. So be extremely careful not to cross thread anything because it's aluminum. Definitely want to take your time with this. Rushing will not help your cause. Okay, so now it's lined up enough. I can see all the holes. I'm going to put the fuel line clip back in place, just to make sure that there's nothing trapped. I mean, everything should fit exactly back where it came from. This little bracket for this fuel line actually has a little notch in it that goes to the intake. Once you get that in place, get your bolts started, your Torx. So just gonna check everything. Looks like it's sitting where it belongs. And remember, you have a stud here, and another stud there. The rest are bolts. Just doesn't feel happy. Shoot a little lube on it. Stud's got a little dry, but thing you really want to be careful of is cross-threading them. I'm not going to give that any real torque. Just trying to get my socket back. nut socket. Just want to bottom those out. You don't want to torque them. So once I get these nuts on, I'm going to reconnect the wiring for the O2 sensors so that I've got room. Then I'm going to lift up on the intake manifold. And while I'm lifting up on it, I'm going to go ahead and start snugging down the nuts and the bolts. This first sensor goes underneath this wire. Satisfying clicks as they go on. Should be nice and neat when you're done. Nothing pinching. Alright, so on this I'm going to start in the middle, work my way out. Again, I'm going to just lift up on it. Not going to be crazy with the torque. And I'm going to just run them all down with my finger first, or I'll not be sitting here all over the ratchet. I don't want to use the impact on them because I want to feel the torque. It's just going to require some patience because of the fuel lines in the way. Plug this sensor wire back in. Alright, so now it's reasonably tight. I'm going to just go ahead and lift up on it a little bit. We're not trying to be Hercules on this. Okay, intake's nice and tight. So now I'm going to put it back together, everything on the airbox system. I'm going to put the valve cover back on, and I'm going to go ahead and start it and function test it before I put all the firewall cowling and stuff back on, just in case. All right, I'm going to tighten down the Torx on the back of the intake that's holding the fuel line in. Looks like it came off when I was wiggling stuff around. Nothing should really be under any tension on this. I mean, if it's going to want, everything's going to kind of want to go back where it came from. So if you've got something that's bound up, take the time and investigate it a little bit. Because, you know, these hot engine bays, brittle plastic, you could end up with a problem on your hands really quick. And this requires 0 torque. I'm just bottoming it out. I don't want it to potentially snap something. So remember, also, we had a vacuum line that came back around here that we moved. It goes up under this clip. And then it goes under your other wiring and stuff. Goes right into the port on top of your throttle body. Make sure you get that back in place. Or you're gonna have a check engine light and a funny whistling noise coming out from under your hood. Okay, that all looks good. Now I'm gonna put the port for the elbow back to your airbox back on. I'm going to wipe that off a little bit. Again, make sure you're not pinching any wires anywhere. If you don't get that tight, you're going to have unmetered air going into your engine, creating all kinds of interesting codes and running and driving issues. All right, the 10 millimeters that go here are easily identifiable. They have blue plastic inserts on them. All right, with this one, I'll go ahead. Connect the mass airflow sensor while everything's still maneuverable. And then work it into the intake duct. seated on the bottom. There's no pinched wires. And you got to capture your hose clamp so that you can get the screw, get it tightened down. Without it spinning all the way around to the bottom of the engine on you. It didn't seat, so back off and try again. As soon as I started tightening it down, it popped out of the groove. All right. Okay, so now with everything kind of in place, what we could do is reconnect this vacuum line. Make sure it's not going to hit anything. Everything that the car needs to run is now connected. So what I'm going to do is reconnect the battery, and I am going to test start it and make sure that everything, that the starter is good and that we don't have any check engine lights or anything like that. And then I'll finish buttoning up the plastic. Okay, I've reconnected the battery, and now I'm going to just start it, let it run for a couple seconds, make sure no check engine lights, and then I'm going to shut it off before any wiring gets hot. Okay, no check engine lights, everything's fine, so now I'm going to finish buttoning up the plastic. when you put these through you want to make sure you can feel on the back that it's going through the actual hole instead of moving itself around, because it'll feel like the threads are biting even if they're not going into anything. Okay, remember, you got a clip on the back of this for that vacuum line, so you don't want it to get misrouted if you can avoid it. Again, everything should sit down really nice and flat. You shouldn't have anything binding up, because that's how stuff gets broken. Speaking from the voice of experience. This one's just a bit funny because it's got those two harnesses going right over where I need to be putting my bolt. I hope you found this video helpful. I'm going to probably quit talking now and just finish putting the plastic back on. If you have any questions on anything in particular, just drop me a comment. I do look at them and answer them quite regularly. And please give the channel a like and the video a like and subscribe if you found this useful. Every little bit helps. Nobody was born knowing how to do this stuff, but it's not rocket science. was a lot more dramatic sounding than it actually was. All right, make sure your screw holes line up, because if they don't, you did it wrong. Perfect. First casualty of the day. My wire loom's closed up on me, so. There's little slots in the plastic here for this to go into. Again, if you have a pretty unmolested car, it's nice, but it's not uncommon to see those broken. All right, no parts missing, none left over. So I'm gonna get my flashlight out of the front here and I'm gonna call it a night. Thank you again. Hope you enjoyed this video. Please let me know.